high-level overview of VXDash. What VXDash is basically is a visualization tool to allow our customers to build their own operational views of the data that's being collected either by VXPulse and or VX Tracker and or just some other data sources. So I'm going to go through and show you a couple of things that we have built. What I don't want you to lose sight of, however, is the fact that if you sign up for VXDash, you are not necessarily signing up in order to get the dashboards that I'm going to show you. These are merely examples of the type of displays that you would be able to build. What really kind of has pushed us along the path of VXDash is the fact that I get hit every day almost for a new report that someone wants. So we want this report in VX Tracker. We want this report in VXPulse. And it's pretty difficult for me to be able to field those requests from our end customers at the same time that we're trying to push some additional feature sets forward. So what VXDash, the intent of it is, look, we already have the workhorses out there. We have VXPulse, we have VX Tracker. They're doing all the heavy lifting when it comes to collecting information, providing basically some canned reports, doing things like alerting, alarming. All of the heavy lifting is taken care of. Let's provide our end customers with the ability just to modify their own displays. So whatever becomes important to you, you should be able to build that into a dashboard. I don't have to have my developers' time. I don't have to try and juggle that. And that's really the intent behind VXDash. So one of the things I hedged on a little bit right up front is the fact that this data is VXPulse or it's VX Tracker. And then I'm going to start out immediately by showing you some information that is coming from something else. Just to kind of show you the capabilities here, this is data that's coming from databases that are part of a ShoreTel implementation. So within a ShoreTel solution, there are several configuration databases. We are able to take a VXDash agent and have that VXDash agent query into that database, send that information up to VXDash, and then we could do some processing against that. So in the ShoreTel world, one of the things that becomes important to them is something called an RTC, or real-time capacity score, where basically, if you're running into problems with voice quality with a ShoreTel system, the first thing that ShoreTel is going to come back to you with is, hey, run this little script and tell me what your RTC score is for any particular switch. If any of those are above 80, then they're going to tell you that, hey, you need to move some stuff around. You're trying to do too much on any particular switch. So just as an example of that, if you are running ShoreTel systems, providing managed services for ShoreTel customers, this is the type of information that we could be able to pull out. You could present to your customers or build your own dashboard and immediately kind of see, anything that's above 80, these are right at 80, but this switch is completely overburdened. Now, this is not something that I would have been able to do with VXPulse in the past, but it's something that's pretty easy to do with VXDash. Let's kind of switch gears here, and we'll look at something that is coming from VXPulse. So one of the most used features inside of VXPulse is the ability for us to have those VXPulse agents make test calls back and forth to one another. When they do that, they're calculating a bunch of metrics or gathering a bunch of metrics and then also calculating a MOS value. What this dashboard view shows basically is that same information that's being collected but presented in a much different view than the reports that are in VXPulse. Here, by route, which is one agent calling another agent, we're seeing average and min MOS values being displayed for us. We're seeing that same data, the average MOS, basically graphed over time across those different routes. There are some very nice graphical features that are part of the VXDash product. One of those, for example, is you can see a list of all the routes over here on the left-hand side. And what we call this is a selector gadget. And what it would allow me to do is quickly turn on and off particular routes. So if I wanted really to drill into that agent 1 to agent 2 route, I can simply click on that. That filter now is going to kind of cascade through any widgets that we have on the screen. So now it really allows me to zoom in a little bit more. If I were to clear that, I can do similar type zooming or looking at data more granularly through a couple of different methods. I can simply select a time or a section within any graph, and it will zoom into that graph for me. Sometimes that'll make it a little bit easier for me to pick out what those individual values are. I also get these little sliders down at the bottom. So if I wanted to kind of zero in on a period where we had, these MOS values dropping, kind of zoom in on that, change the view of that information. So very nice tool. And the other thing to kind of keep in mind, there are two modes to any dashboard. There's an edit mode, and then there's a view mode. Right now, I'm just in view mode. Yet, so you could give this to any of your customers. They could do this zoom in. They could do these different filters. You've empowered them to look at this data in whatever fashion it makes the most sense to them. And yet, other people could also be using it, and I'm not impacting those users at all. Other nice quick features is the ability to, let me just maximize this. This is the one that I'm most interested in. So let's just bring that to the forefront so I get a better view of that. And then if I wanted to later, I can simply restore that back to its position. It's also very easy to kind of change sizes in any of the dashboards. So this particular dashboard has a 3-column view. Oh, actually you have to be in edit mode to do that, so I'll show you that in a little bit. Other things that you can do is the ability to do some additional filtering within the data that's being brought back, or you can also export the data or export the content. So if you wanted the raw information behind this graph, it's very easy to do that. Click on Export Data. It's going to bring up a little wizard that will allow me to select the data I'm interested in, choose the format for that export, and away I go. So just as another example of kind of different visualizations of the same data. So here what we're plotting is average MOS value, which is nice. I kind of understand, who's having problems and who's not. Obviously, this California to New York route is just, I mean, it's awful, right? But this one seems to be okay, this Utah to New York. I'm averaging a MOS of about 4.4. But what I'm not seeing within that average data is what basically is the difference. So what's the high and what's the low? So if I go to the second tab, Active QoE Variance, this tab is going to provide me, basically it's the same data but a very, very different lens to that information. This one pulls in quite a bit more data, so it takes a little bit longer for that to graph. But now I can see that we were looking at Utah to New York. So again, I'm kind of zoom in on that just by selecting that particular route. That will filter down through those other graphs. And now I'm looking at MOS variance. So although my average MOS was in the 4.4 range, I can see that within the 5 o'clock hour, those tests that I performed, I actually had a low MOS of 2.7. So again, the same data, a very different lens to it, and I'm getting a very different story. This view also makes it pretty easy for me to understand that, well, at the same time my MOS values are dropping, I can see that I'm having this increase in my packet loss. My delays are all over the place. My jitter is kind of all over the place as well. If we were to look at that 5 o'clock hour and the jitter, I'm everything from basically 0 up to 12. So all that variance, what it's telling me is that if I look at averages across the board, I might think everything is just hunky-dory. But if I come in and I look at how is that data varying over time, now I'm getting a slightly different picture to that. Okay. Other things that you might be interested in. So if I'm looking at, say, server performance, so if I'm responsible for monitoring, managing a wide range of servers, I'm going to want to look at things like the CPU or the RAM usage. So again, this data is all being collected from VxPulse, and from within VXDash, I can just build whatever view to that data I want to see. So here I can tell just by looking at my CPU over time, I don't have any servers that are really in really bad trouble. This internal VX tracker server seems to be the one that has the highest spike. If I wanted to, anytime there's a legend on a graph, it basically means I can use that to toggle things on and off. So again, another mechanism for me to kind of zoom in and look at what I'm most interested in with that particular one. Again, you'll get the same type of filtering, exporting data, exporting content, etc. The most CPU intensive boxes is basically just taking my average and max utilization and sorting those. So this is in a tabular form. Again, just another way to kind of visualize that information. or I could do something like server diagnostics. And this is basically trying to take a consolidated view of that same information. So again, pulling that in, looking at my overall CPU utilization, my overall RAM capacity. This would be a very nice view if I'm virtualizing all of my servers. From the amount of memory that is available in all of those VMs, how much of it am I actually using? This may point you to the fact that I can probably reclaim some allocated memory so that I could potentially spin up another VM on that same hardware platform. Yes. Same type of thing for network performance. So if I'm really interested in looking at bandwidth utilization, this would be just, again, another sample view of a way to look at that. So here are all of the interfaces off all of the firewalls or routers that I have access to. Same type of information that I'm providing in a tabular view, and then some additional graphical views of that bandwidth utilization. So again, don't want you necessarily to fall in love with the views that we have built, but really just kind of want to give you a sense for what it's possible to do within the VXDash product, which is build whatever you're most interested in. So we're going to go ahead and build one just so you can kind of see what that process looks like. I've gone ahead and created a blank dashboard here called HTTP metrics. Now we are in an edit view, which means now I have this file level menu, and I also have these other gadgets in this toolbar that have shown up. That tells me that I'm in an edit mode. If we wanted to, let's go ahead and give this first tab a name. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot the delay in HTTP connections as the graph that we're going to build here. So we'll just give that a little title there. Okay. Now if I'm looking at delay over time, my personal opinion is that that's probably best represented in a line chart. You can see all the other charting capabilities that are available to you. The choice is up to you. Obviously some data is going to lend itself better to specific chart types. It wouldn't make much sense for me to graph delay over time, for example, in a pie chart. So we'll just go ahead and select a line chart. The next thing that's going to come up basically is my chart builder wizard, if you will, or gadget. The first thing that we need to do is figure out what data we want to work with. Now, one of the things that we're doing within the data is we're not necessarily providing you with direct query access to the database. The main reason that we're not doing that is I can't afford to have one user who decides to go and pull CPU utilization for every minute for the last 12 months and really bog down the system for everybody else. So instead what we're doing is creating models. And models make it very, very easy for you to deal with the information that's presented. You don't have to worry about a lot of the complexity of the data sets. So for this purposes, we're going to go to our HTTP model. Again, this is information being collected by VxPulse. What it's doing is it's connecting to websites and basically looking at how long it takes for us to receive a response from that particular website. My x-axis. So again, I want to do this over time. So we're going to ignore these top two resource groups resources. These are what you would use to build your filter widgets. And what I'm going to look at, I basically have two data sets inside of here. The first one, the convention here, the -1 hour, tells me that this is the last 1 hour's worth of information. I have another one here that is 8 hours, so that would give me the last 8 hours worth of information. Typically those tests are done every minute, so if I look at a 1 hour time slice, I'm going to have 60 values basically. I'm going to go ahead and use my date time as my x-axis. Now if we were looking over a longer period of time, we might want to group that. So maybe I would group by months, weeks, days. Here I'm going to choose not to do so because this is only an hour's worth of data. It's 1 minute samples, so we're not going to group that information. And then in my value y-axis, I'm simply going to choose what I want to plot. So again, I'm going to go to my 1 hour, and I want to look at my average delay. The other metric that's available is average connect success. This is basically a 1 if it's successful, a 0 if it's not successful. So you could use that to plot out your connect availability if you want. We'll go ahead and choose average delay, And I'm just going to click on OK. Okay, and then here's my line chart now. So basically I'm pulling back in the HTTP model. We're looking at my average delay over time as things go. You can see this one bounces around a lot. This happens to actually be, this is a development VX tracker system that we put under a huge amount of load. And so it makes it nice for me or it's easy then for me to kind of display some big variance in this data. Lots of ways you can dress that up. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to edit on this particular line model. Excuse me. And then I can do things like, well, let's give this a better title here. So this is HTTP delay over time. The type would allow me to switch the chart if I decided that this isn't the view that I like. The data is the one where we selected the data. I could also do filtering. So for example, those of you that are familiar with VX Pulse know that we have this concept of containers. Containers have resources within them. If I wanted to, I could come in and say, you know what, I only want to display things that belong to a particular container. So I'm going to say that this is going to choose an in, and then I can say, well, give me a list of all the values for those that I see. So here are basically those containers within VX Pulse. So I could go ahead and apply an additional filter to the data if I wanted to. We're not going to in this case just because I understand the data enough to know that this is from a single system, so we won't do any of the filtering. The formatting, you can do things like change the theme. So this is basically going to change the color scheme that is used. We do have one that is VXDash, which makes heavy use of our blues and oranges and reds that we use in all of our materials. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that one. And if I want to, I can add a legend. We'll go ahead and put a legend on there. We'll put that below. My category, x-axis, value, y-axis. I get several different parameters here. In this case, I like that we show the labels, but I would like to turn them 90 degrees. I think that's a little bit easier for me to read. Go ahead and make those changes. Click on OK, and then we'll see those visual changes made to this particular line chart. So there you can see now our titles changed, HTTP delay over time. Our labels have changed. We get our little legend down below, and it's changed that color to that darker blue. That's one that we like to utilize. Okay. So just to give you an example of how one of those data selectors work now, if this graph had more than one device, I might want to have the ability for the user to quickly and easily filter those. It's also very easy for me to do. So I just choose my data selector gadget here. There are various types of these again. So lists, combo box, checkbox, et cetera, et cetera. Again, the type of data that you're going to be using will probably drive what you like to, or what you want to use. I typically use either a list or a checkbox. For this, we're going to use a checkbox. Okay, again, now it tells me, it's going to ask me what data I want to use. We're going to go to our HTTP model again. And now we're going to take advantage of this resources selector. So here I'm going to go ahead and have it display the name of the resource, and we'll sort that ascending and go ahead and click on OK. One of the things, if there are any database geeks out there, one of the nice things that we're doing inside of the model is you don't have to worry about the behind-the-scenes joins that have to occur between the resources and the actual data itself. It's a big advantage of the model. You don't have to worry about the complexities behind it. You just say, I want to filter based on the resource name, and all that heavy lifting is taken care of behind the scenes for you. So we'll add this selector. It's going to end up in the wrong place for us, but we'll take care of that as well. All right, so here comes our resource list. You can see it kind of ended up at the top there. You can see the list of devices. We're going to clean this up a little bit. If I want to move a graph from one place to another, all I have to do is basically click, hold, and drag it, and it's going to move that over to that side for me. If I don't like the column sizes, it's very easy for me to adjust that. Looks like I made that one a little bit too small there, so we'll bring that back over. And I can't really view this information, so let's fix that up. We're going to go to Edit on our data selector, and we're going to tell it, if I can remember where this is, that I only want one item per column. Go ahead and click on OK there. That's going to give me a single column worth of information. We're not going to have enough real estate to display all of that, so I'll show you the resize of that gadget, also something that's very easy to take care of. A little confused why that one's being so slow today, but all right, so now we've got that single column. I can simply make that bigger by getting my mouse in the appropriate location. I get that solid blue bar, and then I can resize that until I can see everything that I want to. In this case, there's quite a bit more of those than I want to see. So this again would allow me then to come in and select a single resource. This data set only has a single resource in it just for simplicity's purposes for the demo today, but just to kind of give you an example of how that would work. You can also nest the data selectors. So if you remember when we looked at the data model here, we had resource group and we had resource name. So resources belong to a resource group. So I could also add a data selector for resource group, which is going to give me those VXPulse containers. If I filter based on a resource group, it would then apply to the list of resources. So now it makes it easy for me to run this report for whatever resources or resource groups I wanted to see that view operationally. With the layout, again, you have 4 different options. You can have a single column, 2 column, which is what we're working with. 3 column is basically going to add another section here for me. Or the final one is freeform. Yes. Freeform allows you basically just to move things wherever you want them. You can even have kind of some overlap if that's what you wanted to, or overlay. This can be nice depending on what you're trying to do, but with the freeform layout, it doesn't automatically resize with your browser, so just something to be aware of there. We'll go ahead and flip back to a 2 column here. And we'll move this over here. Okay. You can have multiple tabs in a dashboard. Very easy to do. Simply click on the plus. You can see I've got a new column. Then I can go ahead and add my additional views to it as I want to. So changing names of those is pretty easy. So it's my new tab. Click on OK, and then that's ready for some additional items to be added to it. Go ahead and click on Save so we don't lose our changes. That way, if we were to switch over to, say, something like call volumes, which is plotting information actually coming from a VX tracker system, and then if I were to flip back to my HTTP metrics, you can see that all those changes that we made stay in place. Okay. Printing of dashboards, pretty nice. This is just going to pop up a new little window here, basically show me what it's going to look like. I can go ahead and print that view if I do so. Just use your standard printers for it, and just get rid of it to go back to our dashboard here.
Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it and look forward to working with you more in the future. Thanks so much.